Simplifying algebraic expressions. We're going to start with some definitions. Terms in an expression are separated by a plus or minus sign. So in this example here, we see four separate terms. We have 7x, we have a positive 5 or plus 5, we have a negative 3y or minus 3y, and we have a plus 2x or a positive 2x. These are terms. Like terms will have the same variable raised to the same power. So like terms would be that 7x and that plus 2x. They are like terms because they have the same variable with the same exponent. Now in this case we don't see an exponent, but there is an exponent of 1. Constants are just simply numbers. So when we have a number in the algebraic expression, it is known as the constant. And then a very commonly used word in algebra is coefficient. And what a coefficient is, it is the number that is being multiplied by a variable in the algebraic expression. So in this case, you see an example of 7x. Well, 7 is the coefficient for x. So 7 is being multiplied to x, and 7 is known as the coefficient. So we're going to be working with combining like terms. Well, combining like terms, first you need to have like terms, and remember, like terms are variables with the same exponent, or simply constants. To combine like terms, you're going to add or subtract their coefficients. And in this example, we're asked to simplify. So to simplify, we're simply going to combine like terms. And we have like terms here because we have an a in both of the terms, and their exponent is the same, which is 1. So we're going to combine by simply adding or subtracting their coefficients. And in this case, we have 14 minus 5. So we're going to perform that, and we get 9. And make sure you attach the variable to your answer. So when I combine the 14a minus 5a, I end up with 9a. And that's in simplest form. So notice here I have 5 different terms, and I want to simplify it. So in order to simplify, we're going to use the combining of like terms. So what I usually do is I collect the like terms by underlining them or circling them, and then I do the addition or subtraction. So in this case, I have 7y, I have a minus 3y, and I have a plus y. Now when you have a y, you have a coefficient of 1. If you don't see the number, you know it's going to be 1. So I'm going to do the arithmetic here by doing 7 minus 3, and then I'm going to add that 1. So when I combine the 7y and the minus 3y with the plus y, I end up with 5y. And then I'm going to combine the constants here, because constants are like terms. And I have 8 minus 1, and 8 minus 1 is going to be 7. But I need to make sure that when I combine, I have the appropriate sign separating the terms. So because I ended up with a positive 7, my answer will be 5y plus 7. So this next one has different variables in it. So when you're combining like terms, remember the like terms have to have the same variable with the same exponent. So I'm starting with the first term, and I have 3a, and I'm going to combine it with the 2a. So I'm going to take their coefficients, I'm going to add them together, and I'm going to end up with 5a. And then I'm going to the next term here, and I'm looking for any like terms, and I have 5b minus 4b, so I end up with 5 minus 4, which is going to give me 1. But note, in my answer, I only put the b in my answer, and I'm separating it by a plus sign because I ended up with a positive 1. So you never see the coefficient of 1. So when you get 1, when you're collecting like terms, you want to make sure that you leave the 1 out of your simplified answer. And then lastly, I'm combining these constants, and I have 11 minus 6, which is going to give me a positive 5. So I'm going to separate the terms by putting a plus sign. Pause and try. So here, when I collect the like terms, I have 1 in front of x. 1 minus 4 is a negative 3. Negative 3 plus 2 will give me negative 1. Remember, you're not going to put a coefficient of 1 in front of the variable, so you're just putting the negative sign, negative x minus 6. Pause and try. So in this case, you see multiple variables and constants. So I'm going to start by combining the y's. I have a negative 7 minus 2, so that's a negative 9y. And then I'm doing the constant next, only because it came next. It doesn't matter what order they're in, as long as you have the right answers. So I have positive 2 plus 12, so I end up with plus 14. And then I have a negative 9x minus x is going to be a negative 10x. So this next piece is going to be using the distributive property. And how the distributive property works is when you have an algebraic expression inside parentheses, and they're not just pure numbers where you can simplify, to get rid of the parentheses, you're going to take what's on the outside of the parentheses and multiply it to everything inside. And when you do this, you're going to end up with that number or variable on the outside multiplied to the variable inside. So I end up with a, b, or a times b, and then I do it to the other term, and I end up with plus ac. So when you have a negative on the outside, you have to be careful because negative changes things. They change signs. A negative times a positive is going to end up being a negative value. A negative times a negative or a minus is going to change that to a plus. So you have to be really careful when you're working the distributive property and you have a negative in front of the parentheses. So here is what we would see in algebra. We want to simplify, and in order to simplify, we need to remove the parentheses. And because what's inside the parentheses is an algebraic expression, you can't combine it. So all you can do to simplify is take that number on the outside and multiply it to everything inside. So we have 4 times y, which is going to give us 4y, and then we have 4 times a positive 2, so it's going to end up being plus 8. Now this next example, you see just a negative sign on the outside of the parentheses. And really what that means is I'm distributing a negative 1 to everything inside the parentheses. And when you distribute negative, it changes signs. So when I distribute a negative to a positive, I'm going to end up with a negative y. A negative to a plus is going to change that to a minus 2. So minus on the outside of the parentheses, it's very important to understand that that negative will be distributed to everything inside, and it will change the sign of everything inside. And this last example, I put a negative 5 in front, and I want you to notice I'm multiplying it to everything inside. I end up with a negative 5x, and then in a negative times a minus or a negative, we'll change that to a plus. So be careful when you're doing the distributive property to think of your signs for multiplication. Pause and try. So here you should have ended up with 30 minus 6y. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times minus y is a minus 6y. So this next one has a combination of combined like terms and the distributive property. So when you see the distributive property in an algebraic expression, that is the first thing you're going to need to do. And here you just see minus, but really what I need you to understand is there is really a silent 1 that is being distributed to whatever is in the parentheses. So that is the first thing you're going to need to do is do the distributive property here. And that distributive property needs to go to everything in that parentheses. So notice I'm just bringing down the 3x, but now I'm going to distribute that negative 1 to everything in the parentheses. So I end up with a negative 4x, and then a negative times a positive will make that a minus 2. Now once you've cleared the parentheses, if you have like terms, you will need to combine them in order to have your algebraic expression in simplest form. So in this case, I'm going to combine my x's because they are like terms, and I end up with 3 minus 4, which is going to give me a negative 1. And remember, you're not going to have a coefficient of a negative 1. You're just going to have the negative x. And then I'm just bringing down that constant, minus 2. And this is in simplest form. Pause and try. So all you're doing is bringing the 7y down. You're distributing that negative 2. You end up with a negative 10y. Negative 2 times a minus or negative is going to change that to a plus 6. And now you're going to combine that 7 minus 10, and that's going to give you a negative 3y, and we're just bringing down the plus 6. So this next example has double distributive property in it. So before you can do anything, you're always going to have to do the distributive property if there's parentheses in the algebraic expression. So that's the first thing we're going to do is distribute that 4 to the first parentheses. So we end up having 4y plus 12, and in the middle here, it's a negative 5 being distributed. Even though it looks like minus 5, that negative really goes with what's attached to the parentheses. So it's going to be a negative 5y, and then it's going to be a negative 5. Negative 5 times a positive 1 will make it a negative 5 or minus 5. Now that you cleared the parentheses, you can combine the like terms. So you see here I have a 4y minus 5y is going to give me a negative y. And then we have 12 minus 5 is going to give me that plus 7. Pause and try. So notice here when you do the distributive, and that negative really means I'm distributing a negative 1. So I'm going to end up with a negative x minus 5. Combine the like terms. I'm combining the x's. I have a negative 7x minus x, which is going to be a negative 8x. And then 14 minus 5 is going to give me a positive 9. So I end up with plus 9.